The champagne glass slipped from Elena's trembling fingers, shattering against the marble floor of the Grandview Country Club. The crystal fragments scattered like her dignity as 200 pairs of eyes turned toward her, their gazes traveling from her carefully styled hair down to her bare, mud-stained feet. "Oh my God," whispered Margaret Whitmore, the mayor's wife, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent ballroom. "She's not even wearing shoes." Elena's cheeks burned as laughter rippled through the crowd. She had worked 3 jobs to afford the emerald dress that now felt like a costume, had spent her last $20 on having her hair done at the salon, all to attend the charity gala, where she hoped to network for her struggling environmental consulting business. But she hadn't counted on her ancient car breaking down 2 miles from the venue, forcing her to walk through a sudden downpour that had turned the country road into a muddy mess. "Some people just don't understand dress codes," sneered Victoria Ashford, the oil executive's daughter, her designer heels clicking as she stepped deliberately closer to Elena. "This isn't a barn dance, sweetie." The crowd's amusement grew louder. Elena's throat tightened as she recognized faces from the local business community, people she'd hoped to impress. Potential clients who now saw her as nothing more than entertainment. Her environmental consulting firm needed these connections desperately. But standing here barefoot and humiliated, she felt like a fraud. Maybe she should go back to whatever trailer park she crawled out of. Someone muttered from the back. Elena's hands clenched into fists. She had grown up in a trailer park, had worked her way through college on scholarships and determination, had built her business from nothing despite every obstacle thrown her way. But these people didn't see her accomplishments. They saw dirty feet and a girl who didn't belong. She turned to leave, pushing through the crowd of silk gowns and tailored suits, when a deep voice cut through the laughter like a blade. "That's enough." The ballroom fell silent. Elena looked up to see a tall man in a simple black suit pushing through the crowd. His weathered hands and sun-darkened skin marked him as someone who worked outdoors. But his presence commanded attention in a way that money couldn't buy. She recognized him, vaguely, Jack Morrison, the rancher who owned half the county but rarely attended social events. Without a word, he sat down on the floor beside the broken glass, pulled off his leather boots, and set them carefully in front of Elena's bare feet. The gesture sent a shockwave through the room. "Put them on," he said quietly, his gray eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her heart skip. The silence stretched like a taut wire. Elena stared at the boots, then at the man who had just sacrificed his own dignity to preserve hers. In that moment, she understood she was looking at someone who measured worth not by appearances, but by character. Around them, the crowd watched in stunned silence, their mockery forgotten in the face of something they couldn't comprehend. Gallantry in a world that had forgotten what it meant. Elena's hands shook as she slipped her feet into Jack's boots. They were warm from his body heat and smelled faintly of leather and sage, though several sizes too large. They transformed her from a figure of ridicule into something else entirely. A woman being protected by a man who understood what it meant to stand up for someone. Jack rose to his feet, his sock-clad presence somehow more commanding than any man in expensive shoes. He surveyed the crowd with the calm authority of someone accustomed to making difficult decisions. Anyone else have something to say about proper footwear? The silence was deafening. Victoria Ashford's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Margaret Whitmore suddenly found her champagne glass fascinating. Even the mayor himself seemed to shrink under Jack's steady gaze. "I thought not," Jack said, then turned to Elena. "Would you like to dance?" Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. She had never been asked to dance at a charity gala, had never been treated with such public respect by a man who clearly belonged in this world, despite his preference for avoiding it. The boots made her nearly as tall as Jack, and something about wearing them made her feel stronger, more grounded. "Yes," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack led her to the center of the dance floor, the same spot where she had been humiliated moments before. The orchestra, sensing the dramatic shift in the room's energy, began playing a slow waltz. Jack's hand settled on her waist with surprising gentleness for such calloused fingers. "I'm Elena," she said, as they began to move. "Elena Rivera." "Jack Morrison," he replied, guiding her through the steps with the same patient precision she imagined he used to train horses. "And before you ask, I know who you are. I've been following your work with the Watershed Restoration Project." Elena's eyes widened. Her environmental consulting firm had been working on a complex water management proposal for the county, but she'd struggled to get anyone to take her seriously. "You know about that. I've been watching you fight the oil companies for 6 months," Jack said, spinning her gently. "You've been trying to save land that most people don't even know exists. That takes more courage than wearing the right shoes to a party. As they danced, Elena became aware of the crowd, watching them with a mixture of confusion and fascination. Victoria Ashford looked as though she'd been slapped. Margaret Whitmore whispered frantically to her husband. But for the first time all evening, Elena didn't care what they thought. "Why did you do that?" Elena asked, studying Jack's weathered face. "Stand up for me. I mean..." Jack's gray eyes met hers, and she saw something there that made her breath catch a recognition, as if he'd been waiting for this moment without knowing it. "Because I know what it's like to be judged for things that don't matter. And because watching you walk in here tonight, knowing you'd face their judgment, but doing it anyway, that's the kind of strength this world needs more of." The song ended, but they didn't separate. Around them, the crowd began to disperse, conversations resuming in hushed tones. Elena realized that in the space of one dance, everything had changed. She was no longer the girl who didn't belong. She was the woman who had earned the respect of Jack Morrison, and in this community, that meant something. "Would you like to get some air?" Jack asked. "I imagine you could use a break from all the staring." Elena nodded, suddenly aware that she was still wearing his boots, still standing in the protection of his gesture. Whatever happened next, she knew this moment had altered the course of her life forever. The country club's terrace overlooked rolling hills that stretched toward the horizon, bathed in moonlight that turned the landscape silver. Elena breathed, deeply grateful for the cool air after the suffocating atmosphere of the ballroom. Jack stood beside her at the stone railing, his stockinged feet seemingly unbothered by the cold flagstones. "You'll ruin your socks," Elena said, looking down at his feet with a mixture of guilt and admiration. "I've ruined worse things for better reasons," Jack replied, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. "Besides, I'm more worried about your feet. Those boots weren't made for dancing." Elena flexed her toes inside the oversized leather boots. "They're perfect, actually. I feel like I could walk 100 miles in them." "You might need to," Jack said quietly. "Word travels fast in this town. By tomorrow, everyone will know that Jack Morrison made a fool of himself for the environmental consultant who showed up barefoot to the charity gala. Is that what you think happened? That you made a fool of yourself?" Jack turned to face her, his expression serious. "I think I finally did something that mattered. I've been watching you battle the oil companies and the development corporations for months. Elena, you've been fighting for this land, for the water, for the future of this county, and those people in there have been treating you like you're the enemy." Elena's heart skipped. "You really have been watching? Hard not to. You've been to every town council meeting, every planning commission hearing. You've presented more solid environmental data than anyone in this county has ever seen. And they've dismissed you every time because you don't have the right connections, the right background, the right shoes." The bitterness in his voice surprised her. "It sounds like you understand what that feels like." Jack's laugh was hollow. "My grandfather was a ranch hand who saved every penny to buy 40 acres of scrubland. My father built it into a working ranch, and I expanded it into what it is today. But to the people in there, I'll always be the cowboy who got lucky. They invite me to these things because I have money now, but they don't respect where it came from." Elena studied his profile in the moonlight. "Is that why you don't usually attend these events?" "Partly, but mostly because I can't stand watching them tear down people who are trying to make a difference." He turned to meet her gaze. "Like you." The intensity in his eyes made Elena's breath catch. "Jack, the Morrison Ranch uses a lot of water," he interrupted. "More than we should, probably. I've been thinking about that watershed project of yours, the one the council keeps rejecting." Elena, professional instincts kicked in despite the emotional undercurrents of the moment. The aquifer restoration would help everyone in the long run. The oil companies don't want it because it would limit their extraction methods. But it would ensure that this land can still support agriculture and wildlife 50 years from now, Jack finished. "I've read your reports, Elena, all of them you have. I have a copy of your doctoral dissertation on sustainable water management. I've read your published papers on soil conservation. I know you graduated summa cum laude from UC Davis, and that you turned down a 6-figure job with a consulting firm in San Francisco to come back here and fight for this place." Elena stared at him. "How do you know all that?" "Because I've been trying to figure out how to help you without making things worse. A recommendation from Jack Morrison might actually hurt your cause with some people. And now," Jack's smile was rueful, "now I've made it clear whose side I'm on. The question is, what do we do about it?" Elena looked out over the hills, seeing them differently now. She'd been fighting this battle alone for so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like to have an ally. "We, if you'll have me." I have resources, Alina, land, water rights, political connections that I've never bothered to use. And I have something else. What? Respect for what you're trying to do. And maybe, if I'm reading this right, respect for who you are. Alina felt something shift inside her chest, like a door opening onto a landscape she'd never imagined. Jack, I don't know what to say. Say you'll let me help. Say you'll give me a chance to prove that not everyone in this county is blind to what you're worth. Alina looked down at his boots on her feet, then back up at his earnest face. I think you've already proven that. Elena's cramped office above the hardware store looked even smaller, with Jack Morrison filling the doorway. He had to duck slightly to enter, and his presence seemed to consume all the available space between her second-hand desk and the filing cabinets, stuffed with environmental reports and legal documents. Coffee, Alina offered, gesturing to the ancient machine in the corner that produced something resembling coffee on good days. I'm fine, Jack said, his eyes scanning the walls covered with maps, charts, and photographs of the local watershed. This is impressive work. Alina followed his gaze to her research display. It's 5 years of my life mapped out on these walls. Every stream, every aquifer, every piece of land that's been compromised by drilling or development. Jack approached. A large topographical map marked with red pins. These are the contamination sites. Current and projected, Alina confirmed. The red pins show where water testing has revealed chemical contamination. The yellow pins show areas at risk based on soil composition and proximity to industrial activity. Jack studied the map intently. The Morrison Ranch is here, he said, pointing to a large green area on the map. Yes, and this, Alina moved to stand beside him, acutely aware of his proximity, is why your land is so important to the watershed restoration project. She traced a blue line with her finger. Morrison Creek runs through the heart of your property. It feeds into the main aquifer system that supplies water to half the county. If we can establish a conservation easement along the creek bed and implement sustainable grazing practices on the surrounding land, we can create a natural filtration system that would improve water quality for everyone downstream. Jack's expression grew serious. What would that mean for the ranch operations? Short-term costs, long-term benefits. You'd need to rotate your cattle grazing patterns, install some water management infrastructure, and set aside about 15% of your land for conservation. But in exchange, you'd have guaranteed water rights and improved soil quality that would actually increase your livestock carrying capacity over time. And it would give your project the credibility it needs. With the county council, Alina nodded. If Jack Morrison is willing to modify his operations for environmental protection, other landowners might follow suit. Right now, they see the oil companies as their only option for additional income. Jack turned away from the map to face her. What do you need from me? I need you to let me conduct a comprehensive environmental survey of your land, water testing, soil analysis, wildlife assessment. It would take about 3 weeks. Done. What else? Alina blinked, surprised by his immediate agreement. I need you to attend the next county council meeting with me. Your presence would carry weight with the council members. When? Thursday night. Jack, are you sure about this? Once you publicly support my project, Victoria Ashford and her allies will come after you. They'll claim you're being manipulated by a radical environmentalist, that you're betraying the economic interests of the county. Jack's laugh was harsh. Alina, they've been saying things about me for 30 years. The difference is, now I have something worth fighting for. The words hung between them, charged with meaning that went beyond environmental policy. Alina felt heat rise in her cheeks. The project, you mean? The project, Jack agreed. But his eyes said something else entirely. When can you start the survey? Tomorrow, if you're serious. I'll need access to the creek bed, the grazing areas, and the northern boundary, where it meets the oil company's leased land. I'll have one of my men show you around. Better yet, I'll do it myself. I know every inch of that land. Elena's pulse quickened at the thought of spending 3 weeks working closely with Jack. That's not necessary. I'm sure you have more important things to do. I can't think of anything more important than ensuring this project succeeds, Jack said, stepping closer. Besides, I have a feeling I'm going to learn as much from you as you will from the land. Alina looked up at him, seeing something in his expression that made her heart race. Jack, I want you to know what you did last night at the gala. I've never had anyone stand up for me like that. You shouldn't have needed anyone to stand up for you, Jack said quietly. The work you're doing speaks for itself. But if people are too blind to see it, then I'll make sure they have to listen. Elena realized she was holding her breath. Why? Why does this matter so much to you? Jack's hand rose to touch her cheek, the gesture so gentle it seemed impossible from such weathered fingers. Because I recognize strength when I see it. And because I've been waiting my whole life to find someone who cares about something bigger than themselves. The moment stretched between them, full of possibility and the promise of something neither had expected to find. Elena understood that they were crossing a line from which there would be no return, entering territory that was both thrilling and terrifying. Tomorrow then, she whispered. Tomorrow, Jack agreed, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. And Elena, wear good boots. The morning sun painted the Morrison Ranch in shades of gold and green that took Elena's breath away. She stood at the edge of Morrison Creek. Her new hiking boots, purchased with money she couldn't really afford, planted firmly on the rocky bank as she watched the water flow clear and steady toward the valley below. This is incredible, she said, kneeling to test the water temperature with her hand. The creek bed is in perfect condition. No erosion, no chemical runoff, minimal silt buildup. Jack sat on a fallen log nearby, his own boots dusty from the morning's ride across the pastures. My grandfather always said, the creek was the heart of the ranch. We've never used chemicals near the water, never allowed heavy machinery on the banks. Elena pulled out her testing kit, carefully collecting water samples in labeled vials. Most ranchers don't think about long-term environmental impact. They see immediate profits from oil leases or chemical treatments. Most ranchers didn't have my grandfather, Jack said. He used to say that the land doesn't belong to us, we belong to the land. Our job is to take care of it so it can take care of the next generation. Elena looked up from her samples, struck by the conviction in his voice. That's exactly the philosophy behind sustainable land management. Your grandfather was ahead of his time. He was a smart man who understood that shortcuts always cost more in the end. Jack stood and walked to the creek's edge. See that stand of cottonwoods? He planted those 40 years ago to prevent erosion. They're still doing their job. Elena followed his gaze to the mature trees, whose roots stabilize the bank, natural flood control, and they provide wildlife habitat too. She made notes in her field journal, sketching the creek's path and marking the locations of her samples. You really love this work, don't you? Jack observed, watching her methodical documentation. I love the science of it, Elena admitted. The way everything connects. Water, soil, plants, animals, human activity. It's like solving a puzzle where every piece affects every other piece. They spent the morning working their way along the creek, Elena testing water quality at regular intervals, while Jack provided historical context for each section of the ranch. His knowledge impressed her, just the practical understanding of a working rancher, but genuine insight into ecological relationships. The cattle preferred this section in summer, Jack explained as they reached a wider part of the creek, shaded by willows. The water's cooler, and there's better grass. Elena nodded, making notes. Natural livestock management. The animals instinctively choose the healthiest grazing areas. She looked up at him. You could teach a master class in sustainable ranching. Jack's smile was self-deprecating. I just do what makes sense. The land tells you what it needs if you're willing to listen. As they worked, Elena found herself increasingly aware of Jack's presence. The way he moved through the landscape with quiet confidence, his obvious respect for the land, his careful attention to her explanations of environmental processes, all combined to create a picture of a man who was far more complex than his reputation suggested. Jack, she said during a break for lunch, can I ask you something personal? Shoot, why aren't you married? I mean, you're successful, you clearly care about legacy and the future. It seems like you'd want a family to carry on what you've built. Jack was quiet for a long moment, staring out over the pasture lands. I came close once. About 10 years ago. Sarah was a teacher from town, good woman. We dated for 2 years, got engaged. Elena felt an unexpected pang of something that might have been jealousy. What happened? She wanted me to sell the ranch, move to Dallas, said there was more opportunity there, better society. Jack's voice carried old pain. She couldn't understand why I'd want to stay here, working with my hands, dealing with cattle and weather, and all the uncertainty that comes with ranching. She didn't see the value in what you do. She saw the value in the money the ranch could bring if I sold it. But she didn't understand that some things can't be measured in dollars. Jack turned to look at Elena. I realized I was looking for someone who would understand that the land isn't just my livelihood. It's my responsibility. Elena met his gaze, understanding passing between them like a current. Someone who would see the ranch as a calling, not just a business. Someone who would fight for it the way you've been fighting for the watershed, Jack said quietly. The words created a charged silence. Alina felt the weight of implication, the sense that they were discussing more than just his past relationship. Jack, Alina, I need you to know something, Jack interrupted. This project of yours, it's not just about the environmental benefits for me. It's about finally having someone who understands what this place means, what's worth protecting. Elena's heart pounded. What are you saying? I'm saying that somewhere between watching you get humiliated at that gala and watching you work with such passion this morning, I've started to care about more than just the land. Jack's voice was rough with emotion. I've started to care about you. The admission hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Alina looked into his gray eyes and saw her own feelings reflected there, the recognition of something rare and precious. The possibility of partnership that went beyond professional collaboration. Jack, she whispered, I care about you too. The hate mail started arriving the morning after the county council meeting. Alina stared at the envelope marked with crude handwriting. Environmental terrorist get out of our town. Inside, a single sheet of paper contained threats that made her hands shake. As she read. Her phone rang before she could fully process the letter's contents. Alina, it's Jack. Are you all right? I don't know, she said, sinking into her desk chair. I just got some mail that I'm on my way. Alina hung up and stared at the letter again. The previous night's county council meeting had been a disaster. What was supposed to be a straightforward presentation of the watershed restoration project had devolved into a heated confrontation when Victoria Ashford stood up and accused Alina of manipulating Jack Morrison for personal gain. Miss Rivera has seduced one of our most prominent citizens into supporting her radical agenda, Victoria had declared, her voice carrying across the packed meeting room. She's using feminine wiles to destroy our local economy and drive away the oil companies that provide jobs for our family. The accusation had been so vicious, so personally cruel, that Alina had been momentarily speechless. It was Jack who had stood up, his voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd like a blade. Victoria, that's enough. Miss Rivera's proposal stands on its own merits. Any suggestion that she's using inappropriate influence is insulting to both of us, but the damage was done. The council members, already skeptical of environmental regulation, had voted to table the project indefinitely. Worse, the local newspaper had been present, and Alina knew that by morning. The story would be twisted into something that portrayed her as a manipulative outsider preying on a respected rancher. Jack arrived at her office within 20 minutes, his face grim. How bad is it? Alina showed him the letter. Jack's jaw tightened as he read, his hands clenching into fists. This is unacceptable. We're calling the sheriff. Jack, no, it's just angry words. If we make a big deal out of it, if we don't make a big deal out of it, they'll think they can escalate. Jack's voice was hard. I've seen what happens when people like Victoria Ashford think they can intimidate someone into backing down. Phone rang again. This time it was her landlord, his voice nervous and apologetic. Alina, I hate to do this, but I've been getting calls all morning from people complaining about having an environmental activist in the building. Some of them are threatening to take their business elsewhere if you don't evict me. Alina finished, her heart sinking. I'm sorry, I like you, but I can't afford to lose half my tenants. You have 30 days to find another place. Alina hung up and looked at Jack. I'm being evicted. Jack's expression grew thunderous. They're trying to drive you out of town. Maybe I should go, Alina said quietly. Maybe this fight isn't worth it. Don't you dare, Jack said, moving to stand in front of her desk. Don't you dare let them win. This is exactly what they want, to make you feel isolated and powerless. So you'll give up, Jack. Look at what this is costing. Your reputation, my livelihood. Our Alina stopped, not sure how to name what was growing between them. Our what? Jack prompted, his voice gentler now. Our chance at something real, Alina admitted. Every time we're seen together, people assume the worst. They think I'm using you, that you're being manipulated. How can anything good come from that? Jack moved around the desk and pulled her to her feet, his hands firm on her shoulders. Alina, listen to me. I've lived in this town for 40 years. I've seen how they treat anyone who threatens their comfortable assumptions. They're not attacking you because you're wrong, they're attacking you because you're right. And that scares them. Then why keep fighting? Why not just give up and let them drill their oil and poison their water? Because 50 years from now, when their grandchildren are dealing with contaminated groundwater and degraded soil, someone needs to be able to say we tried to prevent it. Because the land deserves better than short-term thinking and willful ignorance. Alina looked up at him, seeing the passionate conviction that had drawn her to him from the beginning. And us? What about us? Jack's hands moved to cup her face. Us. We're worth fighting for too. What we have, this partnership, this understanding, it's rare. Alina, I'm not going to let a bunch of small-minded people destroy it before we even have a chance to see what it could become. Alina leaned into his touch, drawing strength from his certainty. So what do? We fight smarter. We document everything, every threat, every attempt at intimidation. We build alliances with people who care about the future of this county. And we don't back down. It's going to get worse before it gets better, Alina warned. I know, Jack said, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. But we'll face it together. And Alina, you're not going to be homeless. The ranch has a guest house that's been empty for years. It's yours for as long as you need it. Alina's eyes widened. Jack, I can't. People will really talk then. Let them talk. At least you'll be safe. And you'll have a base of operations where no one can evict you. Jack's smile was determined. Besides, if we're going to save this county's water supply, we need to work together. Might as well be convenient about it. Alina realized that he was offering her more than just shelter. He was offering partnership, protection, and a chance to build something meaningful together, despite the opposition they faced. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Jack said, and kissed her forehead. We're going to win this, Alina, and we're going to do it together. Alina's new home was a revelation. The guest house on the Morrison Ranch, nestled among cottonwoods, a quarter-mile from the main house, was a charming two-bedroom cabin with a wraparound porch and windows that looked out over rolling pastures. Jack had understated its appeal. The place was beautifully maintained, with hardwood floors, a stone fireplace, and a kitchen that made her tiny apartment above the hardware store look like a closet. Jack, this is too much, Alina protested as she set her boxes down in the spacious living room. I can't afford to pay rent on a place like this. Good thing I'm not charging rent, Jack replied, carrying in the last of her belongings. Consider it a research station. You'll need a place to work on the watershed project, and this gives you direct access to the land you're studying. Alina looked around the room, taking in the built-in bookshelves, the comfortable seating area, and the large table that would be perfect for spreading out maps and research materials. This is your grandfather's house, isn't it? Jack nodded. He built it for my grandmother after they married. She wanted a place of her own, while still being part of the ranch. After she passed, he moved back to the main house, but he kept this place ready for visitors. It's beautiful, Alina said, running her hand along the smooth wood of the mantelpiece. I can feel the love that went into it. Grandpa always said that a house built with love holds on to that feeling, Jack said, watching her explore the space. I think he'd be happy to know it's being used to protect the land he cared about. That evening, Alina stood on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. The silence was profound after months of living above the busy hardware store, broken only by the gentle lowing of cattle and the whisper of wind through the cottonwoods. Jack emerged from the main house and walked across the pasture toward her, his long stride covering the distance quickly. How's the settling in going? It's perfect, Alina said, meaning it. I haven't felt this peaceful in years. Good you needed a safe place to work and think without worrying about threats or evictions. Jack climbed the porch steps and settled into the chair beside her. Any word from the sheriff about the hate mail? He's treating it as a low-priority case, Alina said, unable to keep the frustration from her voice. Apparently, anonymous letters expressing political opinions don't qualify as serious threats. That's what I expected. Sheriff Hendricks has been taking campaign contributions from the oil companies for years. Jack's voice was grim. But I've hired a private security firm to keep an eye on things. They'll be discreet, but they'll be watching. Alina turned to stare at him. Jack, you can't. I can, and I will, Jack interrupted. Alina, these people are escalating. First, the hate mail, then the eviction pressure. Now they're spreading rumors that you're some kind of eco-terrorist. I won't have you threatened or harmed because of your association with me. My association with you, Alina repeated quietly. Is that what this is? Jack's eyes met hers, and she saw something there that made her heart race. I don't know what else to call it. We're partners in this project. Where he stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. We're what? Alina prompted. We're something I've never experienced before, Jack said finally. You make me want to be better than I am. You make me want To fight for something bigger than just my own land. Alina felt her chest tightened with emotion. Jack, I know it's complicated, Jack said quickly. I know the timing is terrible, with everything that's happening. But I need you to know how I feel. In case what? In case they succeed in driving you away, before I get the chance to tell you that I'm falling in love with you. The words hung between them like a bridge, waiting to be crossed. Alina felt tears prick her eyes. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of finally hearing spoken what she'd been feeling for weeks. Jack, she whispered, I'm already in love with you. He reached for her then, pulling her into his arms with a gentleness that belied his strength. When he kissed her, it was with the patience of a man who understood that some things were worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth protecting at any cost. When they finally broke apart, Alina rested her forehead against his. What do we do now? Now we prove that love and land conservation can coexist, Jack said with a smile. We show this county that caring about the environment doesn't mean destroying the economy. And that two people can build something beautiful together, even when the world seems determined to tear them apart. Alina looked out over the ranch, seeing it now not just as a research site, but as a potential home. A place where she could build a life with a man who understood her passion for the land. They're going to fight us even harder now. Let them, Jack said, his arms tightening around her. We have something they don't understand, a partnership based on mutual respect and shared values. That's stronger than all their money and political connections combined. Alina leaned into his embrace, feeling safer and more hopeful than she had in months. For the first time since arriving in this small town, she felt like she belonged somewhere. Not just on the land, but in Jack's arms, in his life. In the future they were building together, despite all the obstacles in their path. I love you, she said again, because the words felt too good to say just once. I love you too, Jack replied, and kissed the top of her head. And tomorrow, we're going to start fighting for our future. The breakthrough came at dawn on a Tuesday, when Alina was knee-deep in Morrison Creek collecting her final water samples. The data she'd been gathering for 3 weeks had revealed something extraordinary. The ranch's natural water filtration system was even more effective than her most optimistic projections. Jack, she called, her voice carrying across the pasture, where he was checking on a pregnant mare. You need to see this. Jack jogged over, his boots splashing through the shallow water. What is it? Alina held up a test strip that had turned a brilliant blue. The nitrate levels in the creek are actually improving as the water flows through your land. Your grandfather's conservation practices created a natural purification system that's been working for decades. What does that mean for the project? It means we have proof that sustainable ranching practices don't just prevent environmental damage, they actively improve water quality. Alina's eyes sparkled with excitement. Jack, this changes everything. We're not just asking people to sacrifice for the environment, we're showing them how to improve their land's value while protecting the water supply. Jack pulled her into his arms, spinning her around as her laughter echoed across the water. You brilliant, beautiful woman. You found the key to winning over the ranchers. Not just the ranchers, Alina said breathlessly as he set her down. The county council, the business community, even some of the oil company executives. When they see that environmental protection can actually increase property values and ensure long-term water security, they'll have to listen. But their celebration was interrupted by the sound of vehicles approaching. 3 black SUVs pulled up to the creek bank, and Alina's heart sank as she recognized Victoria Ashford, emerging from the lead vehicle, flanked by men in expensive suits. Well, Victoria called out, her voice dripping with false sweetness. The environmental terrorist and her latest victim having a romantic moment in the creek. How touching. Jack's arm tightened protectively around Alina's waist. Victoria, you're trespassing on private property. Actually, I'm here on official business, Victoria replied, producing a document from her purse. I'm representing Ashford Energy Corporation, and we have a court order to conduct geological surveys on this land. Alina's blood ran cold. What kind of surveys? The kind that determine whether this creek bed is suitable for hydraulic fracturing operations, one of the suited men said. We have mineral rights to the subsurface of this property, and we intend to exercise them. Jack's face went white. That's impossible. My family has owned this land for 70 years. Your family owns the surface rights, Victoria said smugly. But the mineral rights were sold to pay taxes during the Depression. My company just purchased them from the previous holders. We'll be drilling here within the month. Alina felt the bottom drop out of her world. Everything they'd worked for, Everything they'd discovered would be destroyed. Jack, can they really do this? Unfortunately, yes, Jack said grimly. In Texas, mineral rights take precedence over surface rights. If they want to drill, I can't stop them legally. Oh, but it gets better, Victoria continued, clearly enjoying their distress. We've also filed a complaint with the EPA, claiming that Miss Rivera's water testing was conducted without proper permits. She could face federal charges for environmental interference. Elena's knees went weak. That's not true. I have all the necessary permits. Because our lawyers have found some interesting discrepancies in your paperwork. You might want to prepare for a visit from federal agents. The threat hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Elena realized that Victoria and her allies had been planning this ambush for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment to destroy both the environmental project and Elena's career. There's one way to avoid all this unpleasantness, Victoria said, her voice taking on a reasonable tone. Miss Rivera leaves town voluntarily, abandons her ridiculous watershed project, and Mr. Morrison agrees to lease his surface rights to us for our drilling operations. Everyone wins. Everyone except the county's water supply, Elena said, finding her voice, despite her fear. Water can be trucked in, Victoria replied dismissively. Oil revenue is forever. Jack stepped forward, his face hard with determination. Victoria, you've made one critical mistake in your calculations. And what's that? You assumed that I would back down when threatened. But you don't know me very well. Jack's voice carried the quiet authority of a man who'd spent his life making difficult decisions. I've spent 3 weeks watching Elena work, seeing her passion for this land, understanding what's at stake. And I've realized that some things are worth fighting for, no matter what it costs. Victoria's confident smile faltered slightly. Mr. Morrison, be reasonable. We're offering you a very generous lease agreement. I don't want your money, Jack said simply. I want to protect this land for future generations. And I want to protect the woman I love from people who think they can intimidate anyone who stands in their way. Elena's heart soared at his public declaration, even as her mind raced through the legal implications of their situation. Jack, we need to call your lawyer immediately, and I need to contact my supervisor at the EPA to clarify the permit situation. Already on it, Jack said, pulling out his phone. And Victoria, you and your people need to leave my land immediately. You want to drill here, you'll have to fight for every inch. As Victoria and her entourage retreated to their vehicles, Elena felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration. The battle for the watershed had escalated beyond anything she'd imagined, but she wasn't facing it alone. Jack's love and support gave her strength she'd never known she possessed. Are you ready for this? Jack asked, watching the black SUV disappear down the ranch road. Elena looked at the creek, at the test results that proved their environmental approach could work, at the man who'd stood beside her through every challenge. With you, I'm ready for anything. Then let's go save our future, Jack said, and kissed her as if it might be their last chance. The federal agents arrived at dawn, their black sedans creating a convoy of intimidation as they pulled up to Elena's cottage. She watched from her kitchen window as they approached, their badges gleaming in the morning light, and felt her stomach twist with anxiety. Ms. Rivera, the lead agent, called through the door. FBI Environmental Crimes Unit. We need to speak. With you, Elena opened the door, her hands surprisingly steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. I've been expecting you. The questioning lasted 3 hours. Elena sat in her living room, surrounded by federal agents who treated her like a criminal, while they scrutinized every aspect of her environmental testing procedures. Her permits were examined with microscopic attention, her methodology questioned, her motives dissected. Ms. Rivera, Agent Martinez said, his voice professionally neutral. We've received allegations that you've been conducting unauthorized environmental testing on private property, potentially interfering with legitimate mining operations. Every test I've conducted has been properly permitted and documented, Elena replied, handing over a thick folder of paperwork. I have EPA certification for water quality testing, soil analysis, and wildlife assessment. Everything I've done has been legal and above board. Agent Martinez reviewed the documents, his expression unreadable. These permits appear to be in order. However, we've also received allegations that you've been manipulating data to support a predetermined environmental agenda. Elena's professional pride flared. That's absolutely false. My data is objective and scientifically sound. I welcome any independent review of my findings. That won't be necessary, Agent Martinez said, closing the folder. Based on our preliminary investigation, we find no evidence of wrongdoing. However, we strongly advise you to be extremely careful about any future environmental activities in this area. There are powerful interests watching your every move. After the agents left, Alina sat on her porch, emotionally drained, but legally vindicated. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jack. How did it go? Cleared of all charges, she texted back, but they made it clear that we're being watched. Jack appeared at her door within minutes, his face drawn with concern. Are you all right? I'm fine, Alina said, allowing him to pull her into his arms. But Jack, this is just the beginning. Victoria and her people are going to use every legal trick in the book to stop us. Speaking of legal tricks, Jack said grimly, I have news. My lawyer found something interesting in the mineral rights documentation. Alina pulled back to look at him. What kind of interesting? The kind that might save Morrison Creek. The mineral rights sale from the 1930s included a clause that voids the rights if the surface owner can prove that extraction would cause irreparable harm to the water supply essential for agricultural operations. Alina's eyes widened. That's exactly what your grandfather's conservation practices have created, a water system that's essential for the ranch's operation. More than that, Jack said, his excitement growing. Your environmental data proves that the creek's water quality is critical, not just for my ranch, but for the entire county's agricultural economy. We might be able to argue that fracking would violate the original mineral rights agreement. Jack, that's brilliant. Alina felt hope surge through her chest. But we'll need more than just my data. We'll need independent verification, expert testimony, maybe even a formal environmental impact study. I've already made some calls, Jack said. I'm hiring the best environmental law firm in Texas. And I'm funding a comprehensive study of the entire watershed system. We're going to fight this with science, law, and every resource at our disposal. Alina stared at him, overwhelmed by the scope of what he was proposing. Jack, that could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and there's no guarantee we'll win. Alina, look at me, Jack said, taking her hands in his. This land has been in my family for 70 years. My grandfather built something here that's worth protecting. You've shown me that it's not just about preserving the ranch, it's about protecting the water supply for thousands of people. But if we lose, we'll have fought for something that mattered, and we'll have fought together. Jack's voice was firm with conviction. I love you, Alina. I love what you stand for, what you've taught me about the land, what we've built together. I'm not going to let Victoria Ashford or anyone else destroy that. Alina felt tears spring to her eyes. I love you too, more than I ever thought possible. Then we're in this together, Jack said, kissing her gently. Win or lose, we face it as a team. That evening, they stood by Morrison Creek, watching the water flow clear and clean in the moonlight. Alina held the test results that proved the creek's importance, while Jack held the legal documents that might save it. You know, Alina said quietly, 6 months ago, I was just a struggling environmental consultant with a hopeless cause. Now, I'm fighting the biggest battle of my career with the man I love. 6 months ago, I was a lonely rancher who thought he'd never find someone who understood what this land meant to him, Jack replied. Now I'm fighting for our future with the most extraordinary woman I've ever known. Alina leaned against his shoulder, drawing strength from his presence. Whatever happens, we've already won something important. What's that? Each other, Alina said simply. And the knowledge that we're fighting for something bigger than ourselves. Jack wrapped his arms around her, holding her close as they listened to the gentle sound of the creek flowing toward its destiny. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, new threats from those who valued profit over preservation. But tonight, they had love, they had hope, and they had each other. Ready for the fight of our lives? Jack asked. Alina smiled, feeling more ready than she'd ever been for anything. With you, bring it on. The county courthouse had never seen a crowd like this. Every seat was filled, with overflow crowds spilling into the hallways and onto the courthouse steps. Alina sat at the plaintiff's table, her hands folded calmly despite the magnitude of the moment, while Jack sat behind her in the front row, his presence a steady source of strength. 6 months of legal battles had led to this moment. The case had drawn national attention, with environmental groups and agricultural organizations watching to see whether sustainable land management could triumph over industrial extraction. The media had dubbed it the Battle for Morrison Creek, but Alina knew it was really about something much larger, the future of rural communities, caught between economic necessity and environmental preservation. Your Honor, Alina's attorney, Margaret Chen, addressed the packed courtroom. The evidence is overwhelming. The defendants' proposed hydraulic fracturing operations would destroy a water filtration system that has taken 70 years to develop, and that currently provides clean water to over 10,000 residents of this county. Alina watched the judge's face as Margaret presented the case. Judge Harrison was a local man who understood both the economic pressures facing rural communities and the importance of water security. His expression remained neutral, but Alina caught him glancing occasionally at the detailed environmental impact studies that covered the plaintiff's table. Furthermore, Margaret continued, the original Mineral Rights Agreement from 1934 specifically prohibits extraction that would cause irreparable harm to the water supply essential for agricultural operations. Dr. Rivera's comprehensive environmental assessment proves that Morrison Creek is not just important to the Morrison Ranch, but critical to the entire county's agricultural economy. Victoria Ashford's lawyer, a sharp-dressed man from Dallas, stood to present the defense. Your Honor, Ashford Energy Corporation has a legal right to extract the minerals beneath this property. The plaintiff's so-called environmental concerns are based on speculative data and emotional appeals rather than established science. Alina felt anger flare at the dismissive characterization of her work, but she kept her expression neutral. The months of legal preparation had taught her patience, and she knew that the truth would speak for itself. Dr. Rivera, Judge Harrison said, please approach the bench and present your findings. Alina stood, her legs steady despite the weight of the moment. This was her chance to make the case for everything she'd fought for: the watershed, the ranch, the future of sustainable agriculture, and the love that had grown between her and Jack. Your Honor, Alina began, her voice clear and confident, over the past 8 months, I've conducted the most comprehensive environmental study in this county's history. The data shows that Morrison Creek and the surrounding land don't just support one ranch, they support an entire ecosystem that provides clean water, prevents erosion, and maintains soil quality for thousands of acres of agricultural land. She moved to the large map that had been set up for the presentation, the same map that had hung in her cramped office above the hardware store. The natural filtration system, created by 70 years of sustainable ranching practices, removes over 90% of agricultural runoff and chemical contamination before water reaches the main aquifer. Destroying this system would not only contaminate the Morrison Ranch's water supply, but would affect water quality for the entire county. Dr. Rivera, the judge interrupted, what would be the economic impact of losing this water system? Alina had been preparing for this question for months. Your Honor, the economic value of the natural water filtration system exceeds $50 million annually. The cost of replacing it with artificial treatment facilities would be prohibitive for most agricultural operations. We would see a collapse of family farming in this county, with devastating effects on the local economy. She saw heads nodding throughout the courtroom. These were farmers, ranchers, and small business owners who understood the real-world implications of her data. Moreover, Alina continued, the Morrison Ranch proves that environmental protection and economic prosperity can coexist. Mr. Morrison's ranch has been profitable for decades, while maintaining the highest environmental standards. This isn't about choosing between the economy and the environment. It's about choosing between short-term profits and long-term sustainability. When Alina finished her presentation, Judge Harrison called for a recess. During the break, Jack found her on the courthouse steps, where she was trying to calm her nerves. You were incredible in there, he said, taking her hands in his. I've never been more proud of anyone in my life. Jack, what if we lose? Alina asked, voicing the fear that had been haunting her for months. Then we'll have fought the good fight, Jack replied. But Alina, look around. He gestured to the crowd gathered on the courthouse steps: farmers, ranchers, business owners, and ordinary citizens who had come to support their cause. You've already won something important. You've shown people that there's another way, that we don't have to choose between economic survival and environmental protection. When court resumed, Judge Harrison's expression was solemn. This case represents a fundamental question about how we balance economic development with environmental stewardship. After careful consideration of all evidence presented, I find that the plaintiff has proven that hydraulic fracturing operations in Morrison Creek would indeed cause irreparable harm to the water supply, essential for agricultural operations. Alina felt her heart stop. Jack's hand found hers, squeezing tightly. Furthermore, Judge Harrison continued, I find that the defendant's mineral rights are superseded by the Environmental Protection Clause in the original 1934 agreement. The plaintiff's injunction against hydraulic fracturing operations is hereby granted. The courtroom erupted in cheers. Elena felt tears streaming down her face as Jack pulled her into his arms, lifting her off the ground as they celebrated with hundreds of supporters. They had won not just the legal battle, but the fight for the future of their community. Later that evening, Elena stood by Morrison Creek, watching the water flow clear and clean in the moonlight. The same creek where she'd first discovered the extraordinary filtration system, where she'd fallen in love with both the land and the man who'd helped her protect it. Jack appeared beside her, carrying a small velvet box. "Elena, I have something to ask you." Elena's heart raced as he dropped to one knee beside the creek that had brought them together. "Elena Rivera, you've shown me what it means to fight for something bigger than myself. You've taught me that love and land can both be protected, that partnership can be stronger than opposition, and that some things are worth any sacrifice." He opened the box, revealing a simple diamond ring that caught the moonlight like the water flowing past their feet. "Will you marry me? Will you help me protect this land and build a future together?" Elena looked down at the man who had stood up for her when she was humiliated, who had risked everything to support her cause, who had loved her when she felt unlovable. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Jack Morrison, I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Elena realized that the girl who had once stood barefoot and humiliated in a ballroom had become a woman who had saved a creek, protected a community, and found a love that would last a lifetime. "You know," Jack said, pulling her close, "I think my grandfather would have loved you." "Why?" Elena asked, admiring the ring on her finger. "Because you understand that the land doesn't belong to us, we belong to the land. And because you've proven that love can be as enduring as the earth itself." Elena kissed him then, tasting the salt of happy tears and the promise of a future built on solid ground. They had faced down corporate intimidation, legal battles, and social ostracism. They had proven that environmental protection and economic prosperity could coexist. Most importantly, they had found in each other the partnership that would carry them through whatever challenges lay ahead. As they walked hand in hand, back toward the ranch house, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought them together. It had started with mockery and humiliation, with a pair of boots offered in kindness and accepted in desperation. Now it was ending with victory, love, and the promise of a lifetime spent protecting the land they both cherished. The rancher had set his boots in front of her bare feet, and in doing so, had given her not just protection, but a foundation for a love that would last as long as the creek continued to flow and the land continued to flourish under their care. In the end, they had won everything that mattered: battle for the environment, the fight for their community, and most importantly, the love that had grown between them like the deep roots of the cottonwoods that lined Morrison Creek. Their story would be told for generations, a testament to the power of standing up for what's right, even when you're standing in bare feet. A love story that proves some foundations are worth fighting for, and some battles are won not with weapons, but with unwavering commitment to what matters most.